"Why is the bathroom light on at this hour?" Jamal Kingston murmured, narrowing his eyes at the soft glow spilling under the hallway door. It was 2:11 a.m., and the rest of the estate lay in perfect silence, wrapped in the heavy stillness of a New York winter storm. Snow pressed against the high arched windows, muffling the world outside. Jamal was not a man easily disturbed by the mundane, but something about the faint hum of light and the odd, lingering warmth in the east corridor unsettled him. He padded quietly across the polished marble in his bare feet, silk pajama pants whispering against his skin. The door was ajar, unusual. No one used that guest bathroom. As he reached for the handle, a draft of humid air brushed his face. He pushed the door open and froze. On the cold, gleaming floor lay a young woman, curled on her side, naked, unconscious. Her skin was shockingly pale against the dark marble, her breath barely visible. For a moment, Jamal couldn't process what he was seeing. Then recognition flickered. Rose, one of the cleaning staff, white, early 20s, quiet. She was a background presence in his home, silent, efficient, forgettable. Now she lay like glass, ready to shatter. "Rose," he called, crouching beside her, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. No response. He grabbed a towel from the rack and gently wrapped it around her. Her skin was ice. "Rose, can you hear me?" Still nothing. He touched her forehead. It was frighteningly cold. The CEO's calm exterior cracked. He rose and hit the emergency panel near the mirror. "Medical bay, now, and call Dr. Collins." The command echoed through the estate system with his usual precision, but his heart was racing. 20 minutes later, Dr. Collins arrived, snow still clinging to his overcoat. A man of quiet authority, he knelt beside Rose with a sigh and immediately began his examination. "Hypothermia," he said, voice grave. "Severe. And look at her hands red from overwork. She's underfed. This isn't just exhaustion. This is someone on the edge." Jamal stood rigid by the door, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She was scheduled for night shift. The system assigns based on rotation. Collins looked up sharply. "You think a system knows how hungry someone is? Or whether they've eaten today? She's a single mother. Do you even know that?" That last sentence cut deeper than Jamal expected. He didn't know. He hadn't asked. He knew her name, barely. He didn't know she had a child, or that she came in during snowstorms because she couldn't afford to lose even a single shift, or that she skipped meals so her daughter could eat. Rose was moved to a heated guest room, a private nurse summoned. As Collins tended to her, he turned to Jamal again. "Do you remember what your mother used to say when she worked nights at the Marriott?" Jamal looked away. That the floor was colder than the people walking past her. Collins nodded. "Exactly. And she said that to you. So don't pretend you've forgotten." Later, Jamal sat alone in the study. The fire was burning low, but he barely noticed the warmth. He held a tablet with Rose Weston's file on it. 27, divorced. Custody of one child, Ellie, age 8. Lives in subsidized housing. Works double shifts. New health insurance. New emergency contact listed. Beside him on the desk lay a child's backpack, pink with unicorns. Found in Rose's locker. Inside was a half-eaten sandwich and a juice box. That small lunchbox told him more than her entire HR file ever did. "Miss Long," his estate manager knocked gently and stepped in. "We've prepared the suite. Shall I inform her agency?" "No," Jamal said, barely above a whisper. "Suspend the agency. She stays here until she recovers." Miss Long blinked. "Sir?" "Get her daughter here in the morning. Quietly. No press. No chatter." He didn't want pity in his voice, but it was there, hiding under the surface. "And make sure she has everything she needs." As she left, Jamal looked again at the flickering flames. He hadn't lit that fireplace in 10 years, not since his mother died. Tonight, he'd done it without thinking. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about stocks, or market shifts, or quarterly earnings. He was thinking about a woman who almost froze to death cleaning his house, and a little girl with a unicorn backpack who had no idea her mother had nearly disappeared from her world. He leaned back, eyes heavy, but not from sleep. "Maybe," he whispered to the quiet room, "it's time I remembered where I came from." The sun barely pierced the gray winter clouds when the black SUV pulled into the circular driveway of the Kingston estate. Inside the vehicle sat a little girl with curly blonde hair, her face pressed against the cold window. Ellie Weston didn't speak much on the ride. The estate manager, Miss Long, had picked her up from the daycare center, armed only with a signed release and a solemn explanation. "Your mom's resting. You're going to stay in a big, warm house for a few days. She wants you to be safe." Ellie had nodded, clutching the small unicorn keychain clipped to her faded backpack. Now, as the SUV rolled to a stop, she blinked at the mansion's vast stone walls and towering glass panels with a kind of quiet awe. Jamal watched from the upper balcony, arms folded. He hadn't slept much, though he'd spent hours in front of the fire, the flickering light playing with memories best left buried. Seeing the child step out of the car sent a tight ache through his chest. She looked smaller than 8, too thin for the cold, her jacket pink with a missing button hung from one shoulder. "Miss." Long led her inside with calm authority, speaking softly, as though she understood that this moment would imprint on the girl for years. Ellie was shown into the guest wing, past rooms filled with books she couldn't read and furniture she couldn't touch. She didn't speak until they stood outside the room where her mother lay. "Is she going to wake up?" she asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "She's getting stronger," Miss Long replied. "The doctor says she just needs rest, food, and warmth. You'll see her very soon, I promise." Ellie nodded, then looked down at the carpet with sudden concern. "Do I still go to school?" "We've arranged a private tutor to visit," Miss Long said. "Here in the house." Jamal stepped back from the railing and turned toward his study. He didn't want the girl to see him watching. He wasn't ready for that moment, not yet. But her voice lingered in his mind, like an echo he couldn't quite shake. Hours passed. Rose stirred for the first time just after noon. Her eyelids fluttered open, and confusion clouded her features. The last thing she remembered was the steam from the broken bathroom heater and the sudden dizziness. Now she was in a bed too soft to be hers, covered with a quilt she'd never afford, the scent of eucalyptus and warm linen in the air. A nurse leaned over. "You're safe. You passed out. You've been here overnight." "Where's Ellie?" Rose croaked, panic rising. "She's here, in the house. She's safe," the nurse reassured. "Would you like to see her?" Tears welled up in Rose's eyes before she could stop them. She turned her face into the pillow, sobbing quietly, too weak to hold back the flood. That afternoon, Jamal stood outside her door for a full minute before knocking. He heard nothing, but the nurse opened it from inside. Rose sat propped up on the pillows, pale but alert. Her eyes flicked to Jamal with something between shame and confusion. I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I didn't know I was that sick. I thought I could finish the shift and get home." "You nearly died," he replied evenly. "You collapsed. You haven't been eating." She looked away. "It's not your problem." "It is now." Rose's lips parted, unsure how to take his words. He didn't step closer. Instead, he glanced at the nurse. "Give us the room." When they were alone, the silence grew heavier. Finally, he spoke again. "I've arranged care for your daughter, a tutor, a private room. You'll stay here until you're fully recovered." "You don't have to do that," Rose whispered. "You don't even know me." "That's true," he admitted. "But I know what it's like to be invisible in a house this big. I was that kid once, watching my mother clean floors while the owners pretended not to see us." Her eyes widened slightly. "You were?" "Yeah. My mom was a cleaner at the Marriott. Sometimes 3 hotels a day. She never collapsed, but she came close." "Oh." Rose looked down at her lap. "I didn't want to take this job, but after the divorce and the bills, it was all I could get. Ellie, she deserves more, and I've failed her." "No," Jamal said firmly, surprising even himself. "You didn't fail her. You kept showing up, even when your body couldn't anymore." There was a long pause. Then, almost like a child, she asked, "Can I see her?" He nodded. "She's in the library, drawing unicorns." When mother and daughter were reunited, the moment was quiet and intimate. Jamal didn't stay to watch. Instead, he walked the estate grounds, hands in his coat pockets. Something gnawed at him, guilt, perhaps, or memory. He passed the old basketball court at the edge of the property, where he once trained with nothing but hand-me-down sneakers and a plastic hoop nailed to a tree. His mother used to bring sandwiches in tinfoil and sit on the bench reading old newspapers. He remembered her words so clearly. "People who have power, Jamal, they can change lives in a second, but most just look the other way. That night, he called a meeting with Miss Long and the household staff. He didn't shout, he didn't scold, but his voice was sharper than steel. From this day on, every employee gets a full health screening, quarterly. We increase wages for domestic staff by 20%. Daycare reimbursement for single parents, anonymous complaint channels, emergency paid leave. Miss Long blinked, scribbling notes. Sir, this will affect— It's already affected someone, he cut in. On my watch, it won't happen again. As the meeting adjourned, Jamal lingered in the empty dining hall, staring at the place where his mother once stood, tray in hand, invisible. Now, he saw, and he would not look away again. The days passed in quiet rhythm, snow continuing to pile along the iron gates of the Kingston estate as if to protect it from the chaos of the outside world. Inside, the mood had shifted. Rose moved slowly but with growing strength, her pale face gaining color, her steps more certain. Ellie adjusted with surprising ease children often do. Her laughter returned, echoing faintly through the marble corridors as she skipped down halls she once couldn't have imagined. Yet despite the comfort of warm meals, private tutors, and soft sheets, a subtle tension had begun to take root between Jamal and Rose. Not confrontation, more like hesitation, a mutual discomfort born from gratitude on one side and guilt on the other. One morning, Rose stepped into the library where Ellie was being tutored and found Jamal there, standing at the tall windows, reading from a thick book. Ellie beamed. Mom, Mr. Kingston knows this story too, the one with the flying horse. Jamal looked up, meeting Rose's eyes with a faint smile, and gently closed the book. Pegasus, Greek mythology. My mother read it to me too. Rose nodded politely but kept her distance. Ellie's always loved horses. She's never seen one in real life, though. Maybe that should change, he replied. There's a ranch about 30 minutes upstate. I'll arrange a visit once the road's clear. Rose hesitated. I don't want to take advantage. You're not, he said simply, but there was a softness in his voice that made her glance away. That night, as Rose tucked Ellie into bed in the guest suite, the little girl looked up and whispered, Do you think we'll live here forever? Rose's heart sank. No, honey, this is just for now, until Mommy feels better. But it's warm, and you don't cry here. Rose kissed her forehead, not knowing how to answer. In the days that followed, Jamal quietly began reviewing the staff records, digging into not just Rose's situation but that of every worker under his roof. He uncovered other quiet truths. Miss Tanya in the kitchen, who was covering rent for her disabled brother. Raymond, the groundskeeper, who'd been walking 6 miles to work every morning since his truck broke down. The estate looked pristine, yet it ran on the strained backs of people no one saw. One evening, he gathered the heads of departments for a meeting not in the boardroom, but in the kitchen, over hot coffee and cornbread Miss Tanya had baked. We're changing the culture here, he said. We look after each other, no exceptions. The staff looked stunned, unsure whether this was a test or a trick, but when paychecks arrived with unexpected bonuses and schedules were updated with more humane hours, the silence turned into quiet relief. One morning, Jamal found Ellie alone in the art room, drawing horses with fierce focus. That one has wings, she explained proudly, holding up her page, because you helped Mom fly again. He crouched beside her, the innocence in her voice softening something old and brittle inside him. You're a good artist, he said, and brave, just like her. Rose, watching from the hallway, felt a pang she didn't expect, not romance, but recognition of a man trying to remember his humanity. Later that afternoon, as snow fell in soft drifts, Jamal sat in his office reviewing investor reports when a knock interrupted his focus. Miss Long stepped in, a file in hand and uncertainty in her eyes. Sir, there's something you should see. It's about Rose. He frowned. What is it? She placed a manila envelope on the desk. It's from her former employer. Apparently, she was fired not for missing shifts, but for reporting harassment. Her supervisor, Mr. Kellen, filed a false report to discredit her. Jamal opened the file and scanned the document's formal complaints, internal memos, unsigned HR decisions. Anger flared. Not loud, but dangerous in its stillness. Get me the legal team, he said. We're not letting this slide. That evening, he knocked on Rose's door. She opened it cautiously, holding a book in one hand. He handed her the file. I thought you should see this. Your silence nearly cost you your life." Rose scanned the papers and slowly sat down. "I tried to fight it, but no one listened. They said I was just a cleaner, that I should be grateful to have a job at all. That ends now," he said. "We'll pursue legal action. You won't go back to being invisible." Rose looked at him, her eyes misting. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone should have done it for my mother," Jamal replied. "And because I've spent years pretending I didn't come from the same fight." As he left the room, the words stayed with her. The next morning, she dressed carefully in a simple navy blouse and jeans that fit just right. When she entered the breakfast room, Ellie waved her over to a seat beside Jamal. For the first time, she didn't hesitate. She took her place, not as a guest or a burden, but as someone who belonged at the table. If you've ever seen someone in need and watched the world turn away, hit like for compassion. And if you feel for Rose, leave a comment. Everyone deserves a chance at a better life. The morning after Rose joined them at the breakfast table, the Kingston estate pulsed with a quiet shift. It wasn't just in the way the staff glanced at Rose with softer eyes, or how Ellie now walked the halls like they were her own secret kingdom. It was in Jamal's stillness, how he paused longer before answering emails, how his gaze drifted to the east windows more often than to the stock tickers scrolling across his phone. He wasn't a man who missed meetings or ignored deadlines, yet by mid-afternoon, he found himself still at the piano room, listening absent-mindedly as Ellie tried to teach herself "Twinkle, Twinkle" with two stubborn fingers. "You're one note off," he said, not unkindly, from the armchair behind her. "I know," she pouted, "but it sounds like a star falling." He smiled faintly, but didn't respond. When Rose appeared in the doorway with a tray of tea and toast, the room grew warmer somehow. "I figured you could use something other than black coffee for once," she said, setting the tray down with practiced grace. "And Ellie told me you haven't eaten lunch." "Snitch," he said dryly to the girl, who giggled. "Thank you," he added, his voice softer. She poured the tea and handed him a cup. "You know," she said as she sat across from him, "I used to dream of houses like this, but I always pictured them as empty, cold, soulless. And now?" he asked. She looked around the flickering fire, the sunlight on the rugs, the faint hum of music from another room. "Now it feels like someone just forgot to open the windows, like it needed air." He studied her for a moment. "You've changed the rhythm of this place. I haven't done anything but fall unconscious in your bathroom," she said, half laughing. "You stayed," he replied. "That changes everything." Before she could respond, Miss Long appeared with a rare furrow in her brow. "Sir, you asked me to monitor the legal inquiry into Miss Weston's former employer. I believe we've just been handed a twist." She handed him a folder. Jamal opened it and read quickly, eyes narrowing. "He's countersuing? For defamation? And threatening to release a fabricated video showing Miss Weston stealing." Rose's face went pale. "That video isn't real." "We know," Miss Long said gently. "It's a tactic." Jamal stood, his voice low but ironclad. "He's playing with fire. I'll handle it." "But if it goes public," Rose began. "Then we expose him first," Jamal said. No settlement, no silence. That night, he sat in his study, the fire throwing long shadows on the hardwood floor. He pulled open the drawer that hadn't been touched in years and retrieved a weathered leather notebook. It had belonged to his mother. Inside were scribbled recipes, pressed leaves, receipts from nights when there wasn't enough money for both food and laundry, and between two pages, a photograph. A woman in a hotel uniform, her smile proud despite the exhaustion in her eyes. He stared at it for a long time. When he looked up, Rose stood in the doorway. "Ellie's asleep," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep either." "Come in," he said. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Her eyes fell on the notebook. "Is that your mother?" "Yeah. She passed when I was 23. Cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She never took days off, never saw a doctor." Rose swallowed. "She sounds like she was resilient." "She was everything," he said. "But I spent the next decade pretending none of it shaped me. I made money, built walls, forgot where I came from, until you." She blinked. "Me? You reminded me of her. Not just your work ethic, the way you hold everything in, like the world's resting on your shoulders and no one's allowed to help." She looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I think if I stop moving, it'll all fall apart." That's what she used to say too. There was a silence, deep and heavy. Then she spoke again. I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. But I'm not going to let that man destroy you, or your name, or your daughter's future. Rose nodded slowly. Then let's fight. The following day, Jamal called his legal team into the boardroom not via conference, not behind screens, but in person. He presented the fabricated evidence, the threat of defamation, and his decision to go public. We'll control the narrative, he said, and we do it with truth, real documentation, testimonials, internal misconduct files from his other employees. Build the case, leak it through reputable sources, make him sweat before the first subpoena lands. The lawyers exchanged glances. You understand the risk, Mr. Kingston? I understand the cost of silence better, he replied. That afternoon, Rose met with a journalist from The Atlantic in a discreet cafe off Lexington, escorted by Miss Long. She told her story not as a victim, but as a worker, a mother, a woman who refused to be invisible. The reporter listened, then asked one final question. Why speak now? Rose answered without pause. Because someone saw me, and I decided I'm worth being seen. Back at the estate, Jamal watched from the window as snow began to fall again, slow and silent. In his chest, something heavy cracked open, not with pain, but with purpose. For the first time in years, the silence no longer echoed. It hummed. It breathed. It meant something. 3 days later, the headline hit the morning news with the weight of a hammer. CEO of Monarch Services accused of systemic harassment and fraudulent cover-ups. Whistleblower speaks out. The article spread like wildfire. Within hours, social media platforms, news anchors, and opinion columns had latched onto the story. Rose Weston's name trended on Twitter, not as a scandal but as a symbol. Her words, quoted with raw simplicity, circled everywhere. I wasn't brave, I was desperate. But sometimes, that's enough. Jamal sat in his office, the article open on 3 devices. His legal counsel called every hour, relaying updates as subpoenas were drafted, as more former employees came forward, inspired by Rose's stand. The board of Monarch Services scrambled for damage control, but it was too late. The storm had broken. At the estate, Rose stood in the kitchen, gripping her phone like it might burn her fingers. The flood of messages overwhelmed her, thank yous from strangers, tearful emails from women she'd never met, all saying the same thing. You gave me courage. Miss Long handed her a warm mug of cider. You all right? I don't know, Rose said. I thought I'd feel victorious, but I feel exposed. Like I've lit a match in the dark and now I can't see what's coming. Miss Long gave her a look only a woman over 60 could offer, equal parts empathy and fire. That's because you're still standing in the middle of the smoke. Just wait till it clears. Outside, Ellie made snow angels with one of the staff's daughters, squealing every time her arms flapped into a perfect wing. Rose watched from the window, a hand pressed to the glass, wondering if courage always came at this cost. That evening, Jamal joined her on the rear porch, 2 glasses of bourbon in hand. The snow had finally stopped, leaving the world covered in a soft white hush. He handed her a glass. You've stirred a hornet's nest. Feels more like a dragon's den, she muttered. I never thought I'd be the story. I was always background noise. Not anymore. He took a sip. The board at Monarch just voted to suspend their CEO pending investigation. He'll be indicted. Rose sat in stunned silence. It happened that fast? No, Jamal said. It took decades. You were just the spark. They sat in companionable quiet for a while, the bourbon warming them from the inside out. Then she asked softly, Why are you still helping me? He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on the trees beyond the fence. Because when I was 16, my mother collapsed in a hotel elevator and no one helped her. I swore if I ever got power, I'd never let someone like her be invisible again. Rose looked down at her lap, heart heavy and full at once. Then I'm glad it was me, she whispered. Because now I get to carry part of her story too. The next morning, reporters arrived at the estate gates, camera crews lingering, hungry for a shot of Rose, or Jamal, or the girl with the unicorn backpack. Miss Long turned them away politely but firmly. This is a private residence, she repeated like a mantra. But the buzz remained. Journalists camped outside. Paparazzi drones hovered near the roofline. The price of truth had arrived. Inside, Jamal called an emergency meeting with his PR team and security staff. We need to protect the estate, and more importantly, the people inside it. Restrict access. Increase security at the front gate. No names confirmed to press without clearance. Rose listened from the hallway, feeling like the eye of a growing storm. That afternoon, Ellie came home from her tutoring session unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" Rose asked. "Someone at the tutoring center said I'm that girl from the story," she mumbled. "They asked if we're poor." Rose crouched to her level, heart aching. "We're not poor, baby. We're just visible now. And sometimes people don't understand what that means." Ellie nodded slowly, but her little face remained unsure. That night, Rose knocked on Jamal's study door. He looked up from a sea of legal documents, surprised but not unwelcoming. "I want to go public," she said. "Not just in an article, a live interview, on camera. Tell the story myself. Show them I'm not ashamed." He leaned back, studying her. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "But I'm tired of being afraid of what people will think. I want Ellie to grow up knowing her mom didn't run from the fire." Jamal stood and walked to the window. "Then I'll call Diane Sullivan at CNN. She's ethical, fair, she'll give you the time." "You'd do that for me?" "I'd do that because the world needs to hear women like you." The interview was scheduled within 72 hours. Rose wore a navy blouse and soft curls, no makeup beyond a touch of mascara. She sat beneath the bright studio lights and spoke with a calm that came from something deeper than confidence. It came from survival. She told the truth, the whole truth. And when the segment aired, it wasn't just the country that watched it, was the world. Comments poured in. Politicians issued statements. Advocacy groups launched new initiatives. But none of it mattered more than Ellie's quiet voice that night, curled up in her mother's lap. "You sounded like a superhero." Rose smiled, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "That's because I finally stopped hiding." In the next room, Jamal turned off the television and leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, heart strangely still. For the first time in years, the past didn't feel like a wound, it felt like a root. And from it, something real was finally growing. It had been a week since the CNN interview aired, and the world hadn't gone quiet. If anything, it had gotten louder. Rose had become a reluctant emblem, her story dissected by commentators, her courage praised by advocates, her face placed alongside words like resilience and justice. But inside the Kingston estate, where the walls were thick and the snow still blanketed the grounds, life settled into a new rhythm. Rose tried to return to something resembling normal. She insisted on helping in the kitchen again, despite protests from Miss Tanya. She made Ellie's lunches herself and kept a respectful distance from Jamal, though their eyes lingered on each other longer than they used to. One evening, Rose stood in the quiet of the laundry room, folding a stack of towels when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Jamal leaned in the doorway, his sleeves rolled, his eyes tired. "You don't have to do that," he said. "You have staff now." "I know," she replied without looking up. "But it helps me remember who I am." "You're not just the woman who used to clean," he said gently. "You're the one who changed everything." She finished folding and placed the towel on the stack. "And you? Who are you now?" He hesitated, still figuring that out. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Before either could speak again, Miss Long appeared with a frown that cut through the air. "Sir, there's someone asking to see you. He's not on the list." "Name?" "Detective Rory Hanley. Says it's personal." Jamal straightened. "Send him to the study." 10 minutes later, a tall man in a dark overcoat stood in front of Jamal's fireplace, hands clasped. His face was weathered, the kind that came from chasing justice too long without much reward. "Mr. Kingston," he said, "I'm here because your name came up in connection to the Monarch case." Jamal nodded. "Expected as much." "Thing is," Hanley continued, "you didn't just expose a corrupt CEO, you kicked over a whole network. Money laundering, bribery, fake employment records, stuff going back 15 years. Jamal's expression hardened. "So this wasn't just about Rose." "No," the detective said, "but she was the crack in the dam, and the more we dig, the worse it gets. You might be in danger." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "People who don't like light being thrown on dark corners." That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He sat in his room, the lights dimmed, staring at the same photo of his mother he always kept nearby. She had that tired smile again, the one that said she knew more than she ever spoke. At breakfast the next morning, Rose noticed his quietness. "You okay?" "Just tired," he said, a lot moving beneath the surface. "Like what?" "Like maybe this wasn't just about cleaning house in my company. Maybe we stirred something bigger." Rose reached for his hand, just briefly. "Whatever it is, we'll face it." It was the first time she'd said "we" and meant it without hesitation. Days passed. Ellie returned to school with a new confidence, waving goodbye to Jamal at the gates each morning. The estate became less of a sanctuary and more of a shared home, but under that peace, something festered. Late one afternoon, Miss Long rushed into the study, her usual composure fractured. "Sir, we've had a breach. Security footage from your estate of you and Miss Weston is circulating online." Jamal shot to his feet. "How?" "We don't know. Could be internal. Could be someone who hacked our cloud. But it's bad." Rose arrived moments later, holding her phone, pale. "There's video of me, from the night I collapsed, from inside your house." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Someone's trying to weaponize your pain. And yours," she added. "They're framing it as an affair, calling me a manipulator, saying I faked everything." Jamal paced, fury building. "We find out who leaked it. We sue them into the next century." But Rose shook her head. "Number, we respond, but we don't fight filth with fire. We show the truth again, clearly, calmly, publicly." That evening, they filmed a short statement together. Nothing rehearsed, nothing dramatic, just Rose and Jamal in the library, telling the timeline of what really happened. No romance, no scandal, just survival, integrity, compassion. The video posted at midnight. By sunrise, it had 2 million views. The tide turned again, and this time, it stayed turned. In the days that followed, Monarch's former CEO was formally arrested. Rose's old manager, Mr. Kellen, was subpoenaed. Whistleblowers from other industries began surfacing, citing her story as their reason. But in a quiet corner of the estate, where life moved slower, Jamal and Rose sat together at the garden table while Ellie painted watercolors nearby. "Do you think it ever really ends?" she asked. "The fight?" "No," Jamal replied. "But maybe it shifts. Maybe we stop surviving and start building." She looked at him. "What would we build?" He smiled faintly. "Something that lasts." And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a storm waiting to break. It felt like the clearing after, like sky, like breath, like hope. The air in the Kingston estate had shifted once again, not with fear, not with fire, but with something subtler, more fragile: trust. It was being rebuilt, brick by brick, in gestures rather than declarations. Jamal no longer hesitated when passing Rose in the hallway. His hand would lightly touch the small of her back, or he'd hold her gaze a second longer before moving on. Ellie had begun to call him Jay when no one else was around, her affection blooming faster than any of them had expected. Yet even amid this quiet progress, unease pulsed beneath the surface. A knock at the door one Thursday afternoon shattered the stillness. It was Detective Hanley again, his face drawn tighter than the last visit. Jamal met him in the study, Rose just behind him. "It's escalated," Hanley said, declining coffee. "The person who leaked the security footage has been identified. It's someone from your own staff." "Who?" Jamal asked, tension prickling his spine. "A junior IT analyst, Malik Jennings, mid-20s, clean record. He was paid off by a third party with ties to the original Monarch board. The payout was substantial." Rose paled. "How did they even reach him?" "Desperation is a door," Hanley said. They knocked. He opened. Jamal exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. "Is he in custody?" "Number, he disappeared 2 nights ago." "We're tracking him." Rose crossed her arms, her voice tight. "So they're still trying to discredit us?" Hanley nodded. "They know you've become more than a story. You're a movement. They're scared." Jamal walked over to the window. Outside, Ellie was building a crooked snow fort, laughing with one of the guard's daughters. "If they come near this house again—" "They won't," Hanley said. "But you need to know there's another layer. Malik didn't just sell footage. He hacked personal data, emails, medical files. Your mother's records, Mr. Kingston. And Miss Weston, your late partner's death certificate. They were looking for something. Anything." Jamal felt something twist inside him, old grief meeting new rage. "Why?" Rose asked, voice trembling. "What are they hoping to find?" "Something to use against you," Hanley said. "Anything to suggest you're unstable, dishonest, or worse. They're playing the long game." After the detective left, Jamal sat in silence, the fire crackling beside him, its warmth unable to touch the chill settling into his bones. Rose joined him, curling her fingers around his. "They're digging into our pasts," she said quietly, "trying to turn our pain into ammunition." "Let them dig," Jamal murmured. "They'll find truth, and that's all we need." But deep down, a seed of dread took root. That night, Jamal sat alone in his private office, a folder open on the desk. Inside was a document he hadn't looked at in years, a report from the hospital where his mother died. He traced the familiar lines of ink, the words blurred by time. Stage 4. Untreated. No insurance. Negligence. He remembered the nurse who had turned them away, remembered the way his mother had smiled through the pain, whispering, "It's okay, baby. We got this far." He hadn't gotten over it. He'd buried it beneath marble floors and glass walls. And now, someone wanted to weaponize it. Across the hall, Rose stood outside the door, unsure whether to knock. She'd seen the flicker in his eyes, the shadow that had returned since the detective's visit. She finally stepped in without a word. Jamal looked up, startled but not angry. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head. "Number." She walked over, glanced at the file, then back at him. "You don't have to carry it alone." He stared at her for a long moment. "And you don't have to prove you're worthy of peace." That night, they didn't speak more. She simply sat beside him, and he let the silence between them stitch the beginnings of something healing. The following morning, the estate buzzed again, but this time with preparation, not panic. Jamal had decided to hold a press conference. Not through a screen, not filtered through a journalist's interpretation. He would speak directly. "Are you sure about this?" Miss Long asked, as she pinned the lapel mic to his collar. "They'll come for blood." "Let them," Jamal replied. "I've been bleeding for years." Rose watched from behind the curtain as he stepped onto the platform, flanked by legal and security teams. His voice was calm, even warm, but every word was a blow to the wall of silence that had protected the powerful for far too long. "This isn't just about me," he said, "or Rose Weston, or even the injustices at Monarch. It's about the systemic rot we tolerate when we choose comfort over courage." The crowd went still. "My mother was a cleaner. She died because no one saw her. Rose could have died the same way, but this time we chose to see, and now we act." By the time he stepped down, the crowd was on their feet, not just reporters, staff, strangers, survivors. Later that night, Rose joined him on the back porch. The stars were sharp, the air bitter. "That was something," she said. "You made them feel it. I didn't do it alone." "Still," she said, nudging him gently, "you let them see your wounds. Maybe they'll scar into something that matters." She smiled, then hesitated. "Jamal, there's something you should know, before this goes any further between us." He turned, sensing the weight in her voice. "What is it?" "The father of my daughter," she said slowly, "didn't just leave. He was violent. The night I left, I thought I'd have to choose between surviving and protecting Ellie, and part of me still feels like I failed at both." Jamal stepped closer, not in pity but solidarity. "You didn't fail. You chose life. That's the bravest kind of win." She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just leaned into him, and for the first time in a long time, let someone else carry the weight. From a window upstairs, Ellie watched them, two figures silhouetted by moonlight, no longer broken, just beginning. The early March winds carried a new scent through the Kingston estate, something crisp, expectant, like the edges of a long winter finally folding into spring. Jamal had returned to his old routine of walking the grounds before dawn, hands tucked deep in his coat pockets, his thoughts drifting somewhere between policy revisions and the look in Rose's eyes the night she told him the truth about Ellie's father. Inside the house, Rose was up early too, making Ellie's lunch with practiced hands, the scent of cinnamon rising from the toaster. She hummed softly, unaware of how much lighter she'd become. That morning, while cleaning out an unused study at the far end of the East Wing, a wing sealed off during renovations and rarely touched, she stumbled across something that would change the course of everything. It started with a simple key, left in the back of an old drawer behind dust-caked files. The key was antique, brass with the initials JK engraved into the stem. At first, she thought nothing of it. But when she moved the bookshelf to vacuum behind it, she noticed a panel on the wall that sounded hollow when tapped. Curiosity piqued. She pushed on it. It gave way, swinging open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Her heart thumped. She hesitated, then turned and fetched a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Stepping into the narrow shaft, the air turned musty and cold. It wasn't a full basement, more like a sealed archive. The walls were lined with shelves, stacked with ledgers, photographs, tapes, and old file boxes. In the center sat a table with a dusty typewriter and a locked chest. The key in her pocket trembled like it knew its place. She unlocked the chest and opened it. Inside were dozens of red folders, each stamped "Confidential" and bearing the monarch emblem. Her breath caught. These weren't just records. They were the blueprints of a cover-up. Internal memos, falsified audits, offshore transactions. But that wasn't all. At the very bottom, hidden beneath a layer of faded receipts, she found something else: letters. Dozens of them, handwritten, addressed to Jamal Kingston Sr., the late father of the current CEO. They were from his mother. Rose's eyes widened as she scanned them. They spoke of payments made under threat, of employees disappearing after whistleblowing, of a hidden account called Project Umbra that funneled cash into legal silencing. Her fingers shook. This wasn't just the seed of corruption. It was the entire tree, roots and all. She hurried back up the stairs, locked the panel behind her, and went straight to Jamal. He was in the greenhouse, trimming dead leaves from an ivy wall when she burst in. "We need to talk," she said, breathless. He turned, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "I found something. In the east wing, behind a sealed wall." She handed him the top folder. As he flipped through it, his face drained of color. "These are my father's archives." "There's more," she whispered. "There's proof your company was dirty long before Monarch. This isn't just about you, or even your mother. It's generational." Jamal closed the folder slowly. "My father always told me to never look backward, that our legacy was to build forward. He was hiding the past," she said. "To protect the illusion." He stared out the greenhouse glass, snow melting from the tips of the hedges. "If I go public with this, you could lose everything," she finished. "But if you don't, you'll never be free." That night, Jamal sat alone with the documents sprawled out before him. The house was quiet, save for the wind outside, and Ellie's soft laughter echoing from the guest suite. He read every letter from his grandmother. She had begged for help, she had warned of danger, and no one had listened. The next morning, he called a meeting with his legal team, Miss Long and Rose. "We're going to make it public," he said. "All of it, the letters, the files, even the fact that it was hidden on my property." Miss Long stiffened. "Sir, if you do this, we tear the rod out at the root," he said. "No more shadows, no more lies." Rose squeezed his hand under the table. "This is your moment, not as a CEO, as a man." Within 24 hours, a press kit was released. National outlets picked up the story before Jamal even stepped up to the podium. They called it the Hidden Room Scandal. But by the time he spoke, it wasn't scandal they were hearing. It was confession and courage. "My name is Jamal Kingston," he began, "and I'm the product of a legacy I no longer want to carry. What I've uncovered proves systemic corruption, covered up through silence, fear, and blood. My father helped build this, but I will not die protecting it." The world erupted. Some lauded him as a hero, others condemned him as a traitor to his name. Investors threatened to pull out. Former board members resurfaced with venom. But the people, the everyday workers, the forgotten voices rallied behind him. That night, as reporters camped outside the estate, Jamal stood on the back porch, staring up at the stars. Rose joined him, a cup of tea in each hand. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I thought I'd feel empty, but I don't. I feel clean." "There's power in truth," she said. He took the tea, then looked at her. Really looked. "I never wanted to be anyone's savior, but I might want to be yours." She smiled softly. "Maybe we save each other." And as the night wrapped them in silence, they knew that while the storm wasn't over, They had stopped running from it. Now, they walked through it together. The silence after the storm was not peace. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your ears, waiting to see what you'd do next. In the days following the press conference, Jamal's name saturated the airwaves, his face flickering on every major network. Pundits debated whether he was a traitor to his lineage or a pioneer for justice. But inside the Kingston estate, time moved more deliberately. Rose found herself both relieved and restless, watching as Jamal navigated interviews, legal statements, and internal audits. He was measured, relentless, and graceful under fire, but behind closed doors, the strain clung to him like smoke. One evening, Rose entered the study to find him staring at a chessboard set up but untouched. "You don't play," she noted, curious. "My father did," he replied, not looking up. "He used to say, 'Control the center, and you control the game.' And he never told me how to recover when you lose your queen." The pain beneath the metaphor made her chest ache. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping," she said. He finally met her gaze. "Didn't I?" That night, after tucking Ellie into bed, Rose stepped onto the balcony to find Jamal on the phone. His tone was low, clipped. "I said no, Gary. We don't restructure for profit while investigating our own rot. That's not transparency, that's camouflage." He ended the call and sighed deeply, noticing her presence only after a beat. "The board's splintering. Some want to replace me. Are you surprised?" "Not really," he said. "But I won't fight to stay in a seat I had to torch to make honest." "Then don't," Rose said. "Let them throw their tantrum. You've already stepped outside the room they're still pretending has walls." Jamal smiled faintly. "How are you always this clear?" "Because I've lived through men pretending the rules were meant to protect me when they never were." The next morning, Miss Long entered with news that shifted the axis again. "Malik Jennings was found," she said flatly. "Dead. Car crash. But—" She hesitated. "He was being followed. It wasn't an accident." Jamal's expression darkened. "Are we sure?" "The car was tampered with, and we found a burner phone in his apartment. The last message he received said, 'Umbra lives.'" Jamal closed his eyes. "It's not over." Rose placed a hand on his arm. "What do we do now?" "We protect the people who haven't betrayed us," he said, "and we dig until the last bone is exposed." Over the next 72 hours, Jamal's internal team launched a quiet but aggressive investigation. Former Monarch files were examined for links to Project Umbra. One by one, shell companies and proxy transfers began to paint a fuller picture, a picture that showed several sitting board members had knowingly continued the funding mechanisms long after the original founders had passed. It wasn't just historical, it was active. Worse, one of the board members had visited the estate 3 weeks earlier, disguised as a potential partner for the new philanthropic wing. His name, Curtis Vale. When confronted, he denied everything. But Rose remembered the way he had eyed Ellie that day, and something about it curdled her blood. "He was here to scout weakness," she whispered to Jamal later. "He saw a child and saw leverage." That night, Jamal's patience snapped. He called a private board meeting and laid out every piece of evidence, every name, every falsehood. "This is your rot," he said, voice steady. "You can either own it or I bury it with you." Silence. Then Vale leaned forward, smiling without warmth. "You think integrity makes you untouchable, Jamal? It makes you lonely." "Then I'll be the loneliest man in America," Jamal replied. "But I'll sleep at night." The vote was called. The board split. Half demanded his resignation. Half stood behind him. The deciding vote came from Miss Long, who rose, hands trembling. "I was hired by your father," she said. "I've buried things I never should have touched. But this man, this son, chose light when he could have chosen comfort. I vote to keep him." The gavel fell. Jamal remained CEO, but it was war now. That evening, Jamal and Rose sat by the fireplace, exhaustion swimming in their eyes. "We're winning battles," he murmured, "but the war keeps shifting shape." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "That's because you're not fighting just for yourself. You're dragging a whole legacy into the light." Ellie shuffled in sleepily, clutching a blanket, eyes half closed. "Bad dreams," she mumbled. Rose opened her arms, and the girl crawled in. "What happened?" Jamal asked softly. "There was a room full of shadows," Ellie whispered. "But then the windows opened." Rose smiled at Jamal. "Out of the mouths of babes." He stared at the fire, then at the two of them. He had always believed strength was isolation, that power was clean lines and closed doors. But now, with a child nestled against warmth and a woman who refused to break beside him, he realized the truth. The only thing more powerful than legacy was love chosen, not inherited. And from this point on, every decision he made would be forged from that fire. 3 weeks after the boardroom split, spring arrived with a deceptive calm. The estate's garden, once buried under snow, now shimmered with yellow daffodils and fresh green ivy crawling up the trellises. Yet beneath the soft stirrings of renewal, an unease threaded through the Kingston house. There had been 2 separate break-in attempts at the estate's northern gate, both thwarted by security, but they were a message. A reminder that digging up the past had roused not just sleeping truths but living enemies. Inside the study, Jamal sat across from Agent Rivas, a Homeland liaison who specialized in corporate sabotage. The files they reviewed were thick, ugly things filled with redacted names and half-truths. "You've done the impossible," Rivas said, tone unreadable. "Exposed a system that didn't just rely on silence, it fed off it. But you need to understand something. Umbra isn't just a project, it's a network. People whose survival depends on the system staying broken." Jamal leaned back, eyes sharp. "Then we tear out every root until they've got nothing left to hide behind." Rivas nodded slowly. "Just know they won't go quietly. The deeper you dig, the more dangerous this gets. You're not just dealing with old men in suits now. You're dealing with ghosts in databases, hackers, spies for hire. This isn't a boardroom game anymore." Later that evening, Rose stood in the sunroom watching Ellie chase butterflies through the glass. A soft laugh escaped her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Since the press firestorm, she had received 2 anonymous letters. One said simply, "Back off." The other, more chilling, "Children are soft targets." She hadn't told Jamal, not yet. Part of her didn't want to burden him further, but part of her feared what it would do to him if he knew. Had already begun to change. The once cold executive now carried a quiet storm inside him, a relentless need to fix what had been broken long before he was born. That night, she left both letters on his desk and went to bed without a word. Jamal found them an hour later. He read them in silence, then walked out onto the balcony where the stars burned low above the city. "They've crossed a line," he whispered to no one. By morning, additional security was hired, not just for the estate, but for Rose and Ellie. Discreet escorts followed them to school, to the grocery store, to the park. Jamal didn't argue with her about it. He simply made it happen. That week, Rose sat down with an old contact of hers, a retired investigative journalist named May Colburn, who had once exposed a private prison scandal in Louisiana. May was in her 60s now, sharp as broken glass and just as cutting. "You want to tell a story this big?" she said, tapping the files with a bony finger. "Then you don't go to the networks. You go to the people. You build it online. Make it unstoppable before they can bury it." Rose leaned in. "You'd help us?" "No," May replied. "I'll teach you how to help yourself." With May's guidance, they launched Project Echo, an anonymous site dedicated to whistleblower stories, internal files, and testimonial videos. Within days, traffic surged. Thousands of employees, former and current, came forward with their own pieces of the puzzle missing bonuses, forced overtime, North Dakota, threats, insurance denials. Each voice added weight to the fire Jamal had lit. Meanwhile, Curtis Vale was not idle. He resurfaced in the media, painting Jamal as an unstable CEO manipulated by a disgruntled housemaid with a savior complex. Rose watched the clip with a clenched jaw. "Housemaid," she muttered. "Charming. Don't waste breath on gnats," Jamal said, scrolling through their data logs. "They always buzz louder before they die." But privately, he felt the pressure mount. Stockholders were jittery. Lawsuits loomed. His legal team warned that unless he found a solid fallback strategy, the board might vote again, and this time, not in his favor. One night, as they sat together with Ellie asleep upstairs, Rose asked softly, "What are you really afraid of?" Jamal looked at her for a long time before answering. "Not losing the company, not even the money. I'm afraid of failing the version of myself I could have been if my mother had lived to see me grow." Rose reached out and took his hand. "You're already that man." She'd be proud and terrified, but proud. Just before midnight, Miss Long called. Her voice was tight. "Sir, I believe we have a problem." She had discovered a backdoor access point in Monarch's internal server code written years ago by an outside contractor but recently reactivated. Someone was siphoning confidential files, planting false narratives, and rerouting funds. "It's Vale," Jamal said. "Has to be." "He had help," Miss Long added. "Someone on the inside." The betrayal stung, but Jamal didn't flinch. He summoned his cyber team, initiated a full lockdown, and prepared for what came next. The following morning, Monarch released a public breach statement, citing an ongoing investigation and collaboration with federal agencies. It made headlines again. The public held its breath. Then, unexpectedly, came the leak. Not from Monarch, but from an anonymous source video footage of Curtis Vale meeting with foreign investors, offering access to Monarch's patents in exchange for hush money and political leverage. The footage exploded across every platform. Suddenly, Jamal wasn't the one on trial anymore. Vale was arrested within 48 hours, charged with espionage, corporate theft, and endangering national security. Jamal watched the footage of his arrest in silence. Rose sat beside him, her fingers wrapped around his. "You did it," she whispered. "No," he said. "We did, but the work's not over." Outside, the spring winds blew stronger. The roots of old trees shifted underground, and the flowers that had dared to bloom did so in defiance of what had been buried. For the first time in decades, the Kingston estate did not feel haunted. It felt alive, and the echo of justice was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. Even as the footage of Curtis Vale's arrest continued to circulate, the adrenaline rush that had driven Jamal for weeks began to give way to something heavier. Not fear, not regret. Something quieter, more insidious exhaustion. The kind that didn't just settle in your bones, but in your spirit. At the breakfast table, Rose poured coffee while Ellie rattled on about her school art project, a clay model of a lion, with mismatched paws and a crooked tail. "It's named Rory," she said proudly, holding it up. Jamal smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "He's perfect," he said, ruffling her hair. Rose watched him carefully. He was thinner now, cheeks more angular, eyes shadowed from long nights and longer decisions. He had become a symbol to the public, an emblem of ethical leadership, but she saw the toll it had taken, the bruises beneath the armor. That morning another letter arrived, this one not anonymous. It bore the seal of the Department of Justice. An official inquiry was being opened into Monarch's historical operations, based on evidence from Project Echo and additional testimony. Jamal would need to testify, under oath, in public. The hearing would be televised. "They'll dissect you," Miss Long warned gently, placing the letter on his desk. "Every decision you've made, every word. They won't just want the truth, they'll want blood." "Then let them have both," Jamal said. "If it means they finally see the machine for what it was." But when he was alone later, his hand trembled as he reread the summons. It wasn't fear for himself. It was fear that everything he had built his credibility, his truth, could be unraveled by a single misstep in the arena of public spectacle. That night, Rose found him in the garden, staring out at the quiet lawn. "Tell me the worst-case scenario," she said, sitting beside him. "You lose the company?" "Worse," he said. "They discredit the evidence, discredit me. The movement dies before it breathes long enough to change anything." Rose was silent for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded newspaper clipping yellowed with age. "This was my mother," she said. "A cleaner, died on the job. No lawsuit, no news coverage, just a one-line obituary. I carry this to remind myself what forgetting looks like." Jamal unfolded the paper, stared at the tiny text. "That's why I trust you," he said softly. "Because you remember the people the world discards." A week later, the hearing began. Cameras flashed as Jamal walked into the federal courthouse, flanked by attorneys but very much alone in the way all public figures eventually are. The courtroom was sterile, the kind of space built to feel fair but never warm. The prosecutor, a polished man in his 40s, began with polite questions, financial procedures, oversight records, timelines. But quickly, the tone shifted. "Mr. Kingston, are you aware that during your first year as CEO, Monarch's subsidiary still operated under the shell funding pattern used by Project Umbra?" "Yes," Jamal said. "That's what triggered my internal review. But you didn't report it immediately, because I needed confirmation, evidence. If I had gone public prematurely, we wouldn't have the full scope now." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So you admit you concealed information?" "I protected the investigation," Jamal said. "There's a difference," the room murmured. The judge called for silence. Midway through the testimony, a surprise witness was introduced. Franklin Ames, a former executive turned whistleblower. He had been part of the inner circle during the Vail years, but claimed he had been pressured into silence. On the stand, he trembled as he spoke. "Jamal Kingston didn't just clean up a mess," Ames said. "He burned down the house that kept us all fed, and for that, he's either the most foolish man I know or the bravest." Outside, the media spun his words in every direction. "Fool or hero?" headlines asked. "CEO saints or schemers?" Project Echo's subscriber count doubled overnight. Rose, watching from home, felt her stomach twist with every headline. Back at the courthouse, Jamal faced the final cross-examination. "Do you think you're a hero, Mr. Kingston?" the prosecutor asked, almost mocking. Jamal looked around the courtroom. "No," he said. "I think I'm a man who inherited a kingdom built on silence, and I refuse to stay quiet." The prosecutor pressed on. "You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" "Because the people who could walk away always did, and look where it got us." The hearing adjourned in tension. The judge reserved judgment for deliberation. Outside, reporters swarmed. One young journalist, eyes bright behind thick glasses, leaned in and asked, "If you had to do it all over again, would you still blow the whistle?" Jamal glanced at Rose and Ellie, standing behind the crowd. Ellie held Rory, the crooked lion, high in the air. He smiled then fully, without hesitation. "Yes," he said, "even if I was the only one who listened." That night, the Kingston estate was quiet, but not the heavy kind of quiet from before. This was the stillness of something having shifted, permanently. Jamal stood on the balcony, Rose at his side, Ellie asleep upstairs. He held the clipping of Rose's mother in one hand, the DOJ letter in the other. "The cost of truth," he said, "is everything they told us was success." Rose took his hand. "And what we're building, that," he said, "is legacy." In the distance, thunder rolled low over the hills. Not a storm, just a reminder. Justice didn't end in courtrooms. It lived in gardens, in children's hands, in names remembered. And sometimes, in the stubborn hearts of those who refused to forget, it began with a letter. Not from a government agency or news outlet, but from a janitor named Harold. He had worked for Monarch's Atlanta office for 37 years and retired quietly the year before the hearings began. "Mr. Kingston," the letter read in neat cursive, "I watched your testimony on television. I cried. My wife cried. My son, who you've never met, called me just to say thank you. No one's ever spoken for us. Until now." Jamal folded the letter slowly and stared out the window of his office, the skyline humming with late summer dusk. The world hadn't shifted all at once. There had been no dramatic gavel slam, no heroic standing ovation. The judge's ruling was cautious. Monarch would avoid federal dismantling, but under the condition of an ongoing external audit and a full reparations fund for employees impacted by Umbra. Curtis Vail was still awaiting trial. Others had resigned, disappeared, or faced their own scrutiny. But none of that felt like victory. It felt like survival. And survival, for once, was enough. Rose was organizing a public vigil at the downtown square, a tribute to the invisible ones, custodians, clerks, drivers. The names no one remembered but whose lives had fueled the very walls of the empire. Ellie had made small name cards, placing them into jars filled with firefly-shaped lights. One jar bore the name Anita Langston, Rose's mother. Another, Thomas Barnes, Jamal's father. They were joined by hundreds of others. That evening, Jamal took the stage briefly, the square filled with candlelight and soft jazz from a live quartet. "Tonight," he said, "isn't about headlines. It's about memory. It's about dignity." He paused. "And it's about the quiet decision we each make, every day, to choose justice, even when it costs us something, especially when it costs us something." The crowd applauded, not with frenzy, but with reverence. In the weeks that followed, Project Echo expanded into a formal nonprofit. May Colburn agreed to lead the board, and under her watch, Dozens of companies began undergoing voluntary internal reviews. Change was slow, messy, imperfect, but it was real. Monarch's board held an emergency vote to offer Jamal a retention package, an attempt to keep him on with promises of autonomy and long-term equity. He declined, publicly. "My job was to clean house," he said at the press conference, "not redecorate the lobby." He stepped down with no plans to return to corporate life. "You're leaving a billion-dollar throne," one reporter gasped. "No," Jamal replied. "I'm building a longer table." That autumn, Jamal and Rose bought a modest lakeside property outside Asheville. Not flashy, but peaceful. The kind of place where you could hear the wind think. Ellie enrolled in a local school. Jamal began teaching ethics and leadership at a nearby community college. Not because he needed to, but because the students did. He'd stand at the front of a faded chalkboard and begin every lecture the same way. Power is the ability to choose kindness, even when cruelty is easier. At night, after grading papers or reading Ellie's bedtime books, he and Rose would sit on the porch, a thermos of cider between them. One night, Rose asked, "Do you miss it? The high stakes? The influence?" Jamal thought for a moment. "I miss my mother," he said. "Everything else I let go the moment I remembered who I was doing it for." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "She'd be proud, not just of what you did, but how you did it." One morning a package arrived at their door. No return label. Inside was a framed photo, black and white, faded, of the original custodial staff from Monarch's first headquarters in 1971. On the back, in ink, "Found this in an old archive. Thought you should have it. Thanks for seeing us." Jamal placed it on the mantel beside Rory the lion, now cracked but carefully glued back together. The living room was quiet, the kind of quiet that came not from silence, but from peace. That Thanksgiving, they hosted their first community dinner, no RSVP needed, just show up hungry and be kind. Rose cooked the sweet potatoes with too much cinnamon. Ellie made place cards shaped like stars. Jamal gave a small toast, hands slightly shaking. "Tonight," he said, "we eat in the name of those who never got to sit at the table, and we pass every dish like it's a promise to do better." As night fell and laughter echoed through the trees, Jamal looked out across the room. People of every shade, background, and belief shared food, stories, and memories. No cameras, no statements, just presence. And that, he realized, was how healing began. Not with declarations, but with dinner. Not with verdicts, but with vulnerability. In the end, there was no headline that captured it, no monument built, but there was something better. A little girl with clay-stained fingers and a crooked lion who believed her parents had made the world a little less cruel. And that belief? That was legacy. The story of Jamal Kingston reminds us that true leadership is not about power or prestige, but about the courage to stand for what's right, even when the cost is high. In a world where silence often protects the powerful, Jamal chose truth, compassion, and justice. His journey teaches us that redemption is possible, that change can start with one voice, and that the quiet acts of remembering and honoring those forgotten can echo louder than any boardroom decision. It's a reminder that integrity doesn't just change companies, it changes lives. And sometimes, the most revolutionary thing we can do is to simply care.